Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to check out our podcast today, Maker Connect. My name is Matt Despins, and I'll be your host for the show. With me today, we have Matt Getty, who is a partner here at the firm, a true negotiation tactician, and architect in its highest form. Also joining us today is our guest, Lon Stroschein. Lon is a former public executive, very successful one, and now lifestyle engineer at Normal 40 at normal40.com. And no doubt has some stories and opinions to share. The one thing we try really hard to do in this podcast is to keep the acronyms and buzzwords to a minimum, and also like to keep it fun, relaxed, and casual. I've known Lon for a little bit, so no doubt that is going to be exactly what he'll do anyway. So, Lon, if you're open to it, I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your career and your background so the listeners can get a flavor of your negotiation experience. Also, maybe you can let us know at what point in your career did you discover the importance of negotiations and start to actually take it seriously. And we just don't want you to be shy about it. You've accomplished a lot, you've done a lot, and the listeners want to hear it. So with that, we're super excited to have you here, truly and genuinely, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, Matt Despins, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast, man. I really appreciate it. And thanks for giving me a chance to talk about a big part of my former life, more than my current life, but it occupied about 20 years of my life. And it's something I truly enjoyed. And that's the art of negotiation, which is almost kind of it can be kind of a dirty word or a passive word for what it really is. And that's really just building relationships that have elements of deep seeds of trust. So I'll give you a little bit about my background, and the reason negotiations and trust became so central to me is I tell everyone everywhere I go, in every job I've ever had, and I've worked for a U.S. senator, I've worked for, as a vice president in a bank, I've been read into 3-letter agencies for classified programs, and I've done mergers and acquisitions. I've done a lot of cool stuff built on trust. But I tell everybody at any stage in my life, at the root of it all, I'm a South Dakota farm kid. And in fact, in the moments when I get done with this podcast, in the very moments, literally, my family's right over here. The bags are packed. We're going to hop in the car, and I'm going to the farm for Father's Day. My dad's there. My father-in-law is going to come up there. So my wife's dad's coming up there, and it's going to be spectacular. And those are the roots of where negotiation in my core were formed, through trust, relationships, helping a neighbor, showing up, and on occasion being forced into having the awkward conversation. And for me, the art of the negotiation is your willingness and your skill sets for how it is you approach an awkward conversation, and to de-awkward it, and to make it a conversation that sets up what it is that you want to accomplish for yourself, and puts on the table a situation that you can reason through with the other party, knowing what the outcome is that you want for yourself. So you're always in control, feeling like you're in control, feeling like you've got options in the conversation, and moving forward, but never from the point of deception, from the place of trust. And that's my style. Everybody's got their own negotiating style. Some people want to come in and they want to get as much as they can for as little. And that is a negotiation to some. And that never was for me. For me, it was, I want to really do well. And I want to get what I need. But at the end of the day, I want them to get what they need too. And there is a way to do that that works for everybody. So let me circle back. South Dakota farm kid. I spent about 5 years working for a United States senator. And that's when I learned the art of just communicating with people. You know, I was the lowest rung of the totem pole working for a United States senator. And it's hard working for a United States senator where at 50% of the individuals you're going to come in contact with aren't going to like you simply by that person, because of the party the person you work for is associated with. That's it. They don't know anything about me other than that. And they already have chosen not to like me. And you have to learn how to negotiate that. That is a interpersonal, very internal negotiation. It's not me negotiating with them on why they should like me. It's me negotiating with myself as to why they don't like me, and being cool with that, learning how to process it, staying in control of my feelings and my emotions and all of those things. And politics really, really taught me that. And it also taught me that you can do really spectacular things for people you've never met, and it makes you feel really good. People in politics get to do that, and it's pretty fantastic. My next stint was 6 years working for a bank. here in South Dakota. At the time, it was about a $2 billion bank. Today, it's much larger than that. And in banking, I learned who had money and who didn't. I learned that the guy who drove into the bank and wore the nice fancy watch and the big fancy had the big fancy suit coat on and came in and sat across from your desk and gave you his personal financial statement, you realize that guy's a few bad quarters away from disaster. And then the next guy walks in and you think that maybe, his shoes might not even match because, he's just scraping things by, and you almost don't even want to take the meeting with him. I mean, this is bad, but it's true. And he'd sit across the table for you, or she, and put their personal financial statement in front of you. And you're like, holy cow, well done. Well done. How can I help you? And so there again, that really informed who and how you negotiate, what you should never assume about someone. And banking taught me all that, good businesses from bad. And then I spent 14 years working for a public company, 12 of which I served as an executive. And the last 7 of which I was the executive director of corporate development, leading M&A. So I did carve-outs and sold off non-essential parts of the business. And we did about 5 inbound acquisitions, acquiring in. And then, of course, in the end of 2021, we were acquired. The public company I worked for was acquired by a huge public company for $2.1 billion. And I was part of the team leading the sell side, obviously. And when that transaction happened, I had the option to stay. I didn't expect to get an offer. Usually the sell side M&A guy doesn't fare well in a situation like that. The acquirer was great enough to give me an offer, something to think about. But at the end of the day, I decided my work there was done. My future wasn't there. Company was great. A lot of people still there. That isn't why I didn't stay. I just knew that I had something else in me, something else I wanted to do, a bet I wanted to take on myself, and I split. So there's my story in probably more detail than you cared to have.
That was exactly the amount of detail that we wanted. And, one thing that you said that was really interesting, I want to tell a 30-second story here and flip it over to Matt Getty for something. But I have a friend up here in Massachusetts who essentially pools a bunch of investors and does real estate hard money loans that they'll turn around in like a day or two. And one of his people he works with he's one of the 9 known billionaires in Massachusetts. Well, in any event, they're meeting one day. They walk back to his car with him, and to your point, Lon, they walk back and this guy's got a 1999 Toyota Camry, and in the back seat he's got empty McDonald's wrappers. So one of these billionaires went through McDonald's in a 1999 Camry. So I know what you're saying about the appearance of someone who might be able to negotiate or have money versus sometimes the reality of it. Matt Getty, I wanted to put that back over to you. Lon talked about kind of a theme that weaves its way through the maker group as well, which is putting yourself in the other person's shoes, giving them the ability to go back to their boss or whatnot and be able to represent a win for them, right? So not just making it all about you. And so I want to hear you chat about that for a second.
No, it's absolutely spot on, right? Everything we talk about, everything we preach and teach, it's the other party has to have satisfaction in every single deal, right? The other party has to walk away going to their boss and saying, hey, this is what I just negotiated with X company. And if they can do that, if you can give them that victory speech or quote unquote their pound of flesh, then you're going to build relationships. You're going to establish trust. And I love the fact you talked on trust. We talk a lot about trust, and in the corporate world, people think it's ability, right? Ability to build trust. About, I can do it. That way they're going to trust me. And it's not. I mean, science says it's benevolence, and benevolence comes down to taking an interest in the other party, understanding what's important to them, figuring out, hey, how are we going to maximize value for both of us? Obviously, one party is always going to win more because people value things differently. But yeah, it's massive, massive, massive focus on trust. And yeah, I mean, Lon, to your point, a lot of people think negotiation is deceptive or manipulation, and it's not. It's relationships, and it's making sure both parties get what they want, because both parties want something. That's why they're actually negotiating. So yes, absolutely spot on, and love to hear you say that.
So Lon, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you were part of some big, huge deals. I mean, before kind of bringing your services out to the general public. Is it fair to say, did I understand you correctly, that relationships would really be one of the things you would deem to be the most important, or did I misunderstand?
No, that's central. I mean, everybody, you talk to any M&A guy and they've all got their own kind of playbook of how they go about it. And I'll just share mine because that's the one I work from. One of my favorite days tends to be a lot of M&A guys' least favorite day. A lot of M&A guys go for a close, and obviously that's the highlight. But one of my favorite days was identifying a target that I felt at some point in the next 5 years belonged inside of our company, where the skills the skills that the team has there, the products that the company has engineered and designed and created, and the markets they serve fit, and that the future of that company just belongs in a company like ours. Now, they didn't know it. They didn't look at we were usually the larger company. They didn't look at us and know that. But I felt like my gift was to identify them and then reach out to the buyer in a way that's not offensive. Because you can reach out to a company who's, 25, 30, 40 million, get to the owner and say, hey, we really like you. We think that, would you be interested in a conversation about acquisition? And they'll hang up on you. They'll be pissed off. It'll be offensive to think that, oh, a bigger company can come in, just assume I'm for sale. And if you start there, you're dead in the water. So for me, it was like, this is going to be a long game. It's going to be a long game of me building that trust. So I would fly out and I would meet them and I would tell them, I don't have an agenda. My only thing I want to accomplish is that you and I create a relationship whereby if we feel we need to, we can pick up the phone and talk to one another. Be that for an opportunity we want to chase together, be it for a new market we want to go in together, or be it to just see if we're seeing the same things in the market. But now we're not a stranger. We're not just a competitor that's on a wall somewhere. We're people and we know one another. And that was always my first approach to just saying, let's just start with a relationship. And if we can tolerate being around one another and going to dinner with one another, and then we can trust one another to show each other our companies, well, now we're way better than we were just 1 month ago. We've got a chance now. So that was always where I started. And I started to build that relationship with them. And then usually in meeting 2 or 3, I would tell them, hey, look, my job is just, we'd wrap up a conversation and we get to this place. I'm like, hey, look, I am the executive director of corporate development. I admire what you've done here, man. I think it's great. I admire your company. I like your team. I like where you're going. I don't make any assumptions that your company's for sale. None. I'm not giving you, this isn't an overture. This isn't anything, but I want you to know that life happens. And if you ever find yourself in a position to where you might think a transaction is something you'd like to discuss without any obligation, I want you to call me. I want to just have that conversation without any of the stress around, are we in a negotiation or not? And let's just see if it's possible. And after doing that for about 3 or 4 years, after, I did M&A for just about 7, and it took about 3 or 4 years to get that flywheel going. And then over time, my phone started to ring in, and life happens. People they were getting ready to make a life pivot. And I was the person they called. Raven was the company that got to visit with them. And so acquisitions started to really be built on trust. They started to come to us rather than us having to go out. And the big thing is we didn't have to compete. It wasn't competitive. We weren't competing against 3 or 4 other bidders. We were doing it on relationships, trust, and mutual wins.
Mutual wins. And so, building that foundation of trust gave you the clout later on to have these people coming to you to talk about their needs, right? Not necessarily because it was purely about the money, but they had trust in you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Usually one of the things I really tried to do, and I was never the deep technology guy. So I always had to come back and
I can relate.
Yeah. I had to get the engineers around the table, and usually it was their engineers and our engineers. And what I really love to do is find a product for us or a market where we could bring our products together and try to create a relationship there where we're both making some money on something. And here's why that's important. It was less about the money and more about the culture. And if our engineering cultures could work together, if our sales cultures could work together, and our products work together, that's not really a cultural thing, but it's important to business. Then you really find a lot. The thing with, we're talking about negotiations, and I'm jumping to after the negotiation is done, and you've got to do the hard work of running a business. And I'm talking about the integration and post-close. One of the things that's hardest to do in M&A due diligence is really to do the due diligence of knowing, is this a company I really want? Do I really want this company's DNA inside of my company? Do I really, do they value the things we value? Do they care about the things we care about? Do they talk the way we talk? And because those things are hard to do due diligence on, and a lot of companies don't even do due diligence on it. They assume that that it'll just take care of itself, which is a horrible assumption. And so I always try to get our engineering teams and our sales teams to have a common goal, something to work on, and some test criteria for both me and the seller, the owner, to think, okay, maybe this is, maybe, just maybe, the seller might think this technology in this company does belong in that company.
I think that in talking about demystifying negotiations and corporate transactions and that whole world, I think that sometimes people can have a perception that the people who are out there doing the best in that world in terms of having success are people who are filled with, big, well-pressed suits and kind of have this general edge and demeanor about them. Can't be kind people. But here we are, to our listeners, we have one of the more successful people we've ever had on this podcast. And, he's a farm guy, right? Right, Lon? You're a farm guy. And so there's a way to marry and have normalcy and integrity and humanity and kindness and compassion at the same time as having a successful negotiation. And Matt Getty, I know that's something that you talk about a lot too, which is making it into a more humble human experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that ego is a destruction of value. Like, we've got so much ego in the corporate world. It just destroys people's ability to build relationships. People step on their own feet. They get in their own way. They leave value on the table because they think I am the most important aspect. And in reality, it's what's the combined deal look like? How do you structure value for both parties? How do you deliver that satisfaction, which we referenced earlier? And yeah, I mean, people just get way too egotistical. Deals break down, emotions fly, and that's one of the things with negotiation, right? It's not an emotional process. It's a business process. And if you can control your emotions, you can control your ego. You can understand that, yeah, to Lon's point, it's uncomfortable, right? It's going to be an awkward conversation. You're going to be much more successful. But so many people let their own selves get in the way. And especially for entrepreneurs, I obviously talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and you just tell them, hey, like, don't let yourself get in the way of your success. And but it's hard for people to do. It's really, really hard.
Lon, did you see that a lot back in your days in corporate? I'm sure also too. And I mean, I know there's no ego in politics, but but I mean, would you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 call it the biggest impediment you could imagine, 1 being nothing? Where do you think ego fell on either the corporate or political world?
Look, I'd probably use a little bit different word than ego, although it works. I would use image, and the image of how well you negotiated it. So if you're the negotiator and the CEO is asking you to do something, it's not your ego for you. It's like, sometimes it is. For me, it wasn't. For me, it wouldn't have been. It would have been image. And what do they think I did? How well did they think I negotiated this? How well did I ask the questions? And so ego is for you internally and you process it. Image is for how you appear to other people. And I think image is a big thing. But let me say one thing that's really important. And Matt Getty said it, and I want to dance back to it a little bit because I dealt with it every single day I was working on a transaction, and that is the process of M&A and the process of negotiation being about business and not an emotional process, not an emotional experience. And one of the things I learned early is that from the buy side and from the bigger corporate side, that's true. It's a business decision. The numbers work, the boxes are checked, we're spending the money or we're not. But one of the things I learned early was that's not how the seller views this. And to the extent you come in and you say, hey, look, here's our balance sheet, here's yours, here's our markets, here's yours, here's what we're willing to spend, will you take it? And you treat it like a business transaction. Those are the deals that don't get done. And those are the people who don't invite you to dinner and they invite you to leave their office, in fact. So yes, it's business. It's always business, but it is also, from their standpoint, it is emotional. It is an extension of them. It is their DNA. It's everything that they've worked, clawed, scratched, and sacrificed for the last 15 years. And if you go in and appreciate that, and I talked about this up front, I admire your company. I worked that phrase into every conversation. I admire what you've done. I admire the company, and I admire how far you've brought it. That shit's hard. And so it is emotional, and you have to. For me, I felt like for me to be successful, for me to get a deal to close, which means checked all the boxes. We've looked under every single rug. We got deals to the 1 yard line a lot and walked away because we found something we couldn't deal with. So the deals that actually get over the into the end zone, those are really, really rare. Which means that you have to have a lot of trust and a lot of things in the flywheel to have any chance of doing 2 or 3 of these in a year. So just long way of saying it. Sorry for the long-winded response to this. But
No, we love it.
Just knowing when you should be thinking about this as a business and when you should be thinking about this as an extension of who they are as a person and which words you use to negotiate. You're still negotiating through this. You're still trying to move this forward, which is the negotiation. And so just being really cognizant of who you need to show up as is super important.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people can have a vision of negotiations as more of like a Texas Hold'em poker game, where I'm going to bet out 100, they raise me 300, and so like it's that type of like very immediate transaction. But I think what you're touching on, Lon, is that kind of a bit cliche but true, which is negotiations as both an art and a science, right? The numbers and the science versus the art of maybe including some of that emotion into it. So I think that's a really good point. I'm really fascinated to hear your answer to this question because you've been involved in so many lengthy and big ticket negotiations. Movies often portray negotiations with pounding fists on tables and intense facial expressions and yelling with emotions and manipulations. What do you think the biggest difference is between real life negotiations and the ones that we see in the movies?
Well, the only data I have to go from is from my own experience. And, there again, when I hear negotiation, I think M&A. So I think of 2 companies becoming one. And that is an emotional, high stress, high pressure, big stakes kind of deal. It's not losing a sale. And on occasion, they're big. It's not betting your week. It's not betting you're going to lose your month. It's betting your company. And so the emotions can run high, and timelines are almost impossible to hit. And one of the things that you realize when you do a lot of acquisitions is oftentimes the smaller the deal and the less complex the seller. And I don't mean that from an education standpoint. I mean, they've never been through an acquisition before. They're not complex sellers. They haven't been through the process. They haven't hired an advisor. Those deals are more work than $100 million deal where the seller's organized. They know what they expect. They know what they want, and they're more wired to treat it like a business transaction. So what's the difference? I would say that in my company, tensions could run high, of course, because acquisitions are a ton of work. You can get the ball. I'm serious when I said we literally were on the 1 yard line. We literally were days away from signing. Like money had been put in escrow and we walked away. And by the time you get to that point, there's so much momentum. There's so much work and momentum. And you've already started to think about who's going to report. You've got the org chart ready to hand out on closing day. Who's going to report to whom and how it's going to go and how it's going to, there's so much momentum to pull that red lever. The proverbial red lever in the train, there's so much momentum to screech the brakes that when you do and you raise the flag, it becomes so hard to raise the flag when you see a problem that momentum can carry you through. And that's dangerous. So, I think in my company, there wasn't any banging of the tables, but man, it is emotional. It's charged. And it is on their side too. You've got 2 emotions. It's not just my emotions, it's the seller's emotions too. And so it could be very, very prickly at times. No doubt. The thing is, if you've got the trust, you're willing to go at that awkward conversation. And let me tell you, they get really dang awkward at times.
Sure.
especially depending on what you find in due diligence. You'll find some weird stuff that this owner didn't know anything about, and they'll be surprised by it. So anyway, so long as you keep that line of communication open, the seller appreciates bad news over no news any day. And so you just have to make sure you're willing to have that awkward conversation as often as needed.
Matt Getty, you're up. So in the sense of either from a M&A standpoint or just all of the number of Fortune 1000 and Fortune 500 companies that the Maker Group has partnered with, what do you feel about some of the things that Lon said?
No, it's spot on, right? It's awkward, uncomfortable conversations, right? Our biggest teaching point when we go train sales teams, procurement teams, executives is get comfortable being uncomfortable. In Western society, I mean, it's why negotiation, I think, has a black stain against it for a lot of people. It's an uncomfortable thing that people have to do. And so how do you get comfortable with your emotions? How do you get comfortable with the process? And then how do you drive that forward? And I mean, in my previous life before the Make Group, we built 2 businesses, we sold 2 businesses, and Lon hits it right on the head, right? That high stake emotion, especially when you're selling your baby, is just.
Did Lon buy those businesses?
I wish Lon would have bought those businesses.
Is there something going on that the host didn't know about? Go ahead, Matt.
He's telling the stories about the terrible M&A companies, and those were the companies we dealt with. One in private equity, one in pharma. But yeah, it's tough, but it's the ability to have uncomfortable conversations, and I think that's what Lon. Don't know you that well, but I think attributed to your success is your ability to have those awkward conversations. And most people can't do that. They want to avoid it at all costs, and it just makes things worse. And then there's surprises and things fall apart versus, to your point, building that trust, having those uncomfortable, awkward conversations just goes a long, long way. And it's what we just try to preach to people all the time. But it's hard for people to do. And so it's just helping them feel safe to say, hey, how do you get more planned and processed to have those uncomfortable conversations? Because the better plan I have, the more strength, confidence I'm going to go into having an uncomfortable conversation, because I've thought about risks, opportunities, things that can go wrong, etc.
I actually am genuinely fascinated with this next question. Lon, where do you think you got the ability to be comfortable in uncomfortable conversations? Where do you think that came from? How young do you remember being comfortable in uncomfortable situations as a farm kid?
It's man, it's something I still work on. An awkward conversation remains an awkward conversation. It's just you sharpen the fortitude to actually go have them. Matt Getty was talking about negotiation for sales teams, which is different than we're talking about for M&A. And I take this for what it's worth. And if I could give a message not to the sales teams but to the sales leader, I would give this message. If you're frustrated with your sales team because they're not being aggressive enough and they're not having these awkward conversations, either they're not chasing or they're not communicating with the customer in a way that level sets the customer's expectations, maybe the problem is you. Maybe the problem is that, keep in mind, what motivates people to work harder is trust. Maybe they don't trust that you have their back, and that if they let this deal fall through, if they push too hard and it dies, they don't push hard enough and it doesn't happen, that they're going to get fired. Maybe, dude, the problem is you. And to the extent that you can build that trusting relationship so that the people out there fighting for your company and for you know that you have their back and you've told them that, and you're going to let them fall so long as they learn from it, you're going to have a radically different sales team and an engineering team and an operations team and a marketing team. Your whole team is going to be different once they feel like, I can fail and be okay. I can fail and not be a failure because this guy I work for gets it. If you can be that guy, you're going to convert, you're going to turn your company around, and it's going to be built on trust. But one of the reasons, by the way, that they might be reluctant to have the awkward conversation is that they're scared as hell that it won't go well and their ass is on the line.
Yeah. We say all the time, leaders don't have a backbone. Many leaders don't have a backbone. And you can look at companies that are doing well. You look at the leader and you say, okay, this person's got the people's back. Or you look at companies that are struggling. You're like, okay, that leader has no backbone. Or they white knight every situation, right? Where they step on their people's toes, they jump in there, they cut the legs off underneath their teams, and it's just like. And that's the thing. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Like there's just simple, basic blocking and tackling you can do from a leadership perspective, cultural perspective, that just makes a massive amount of difference.
Something's occurring to me right now while we're having this, which is you know, Lon, being in MMA, M&A, your job was to go in and look at these companies to evaluate the very things that we're talking about, right? I mean, you really needed to look underneath the hood to see exactly how these companies were functioning. So in that instance, you really had a front row seat into the functionality or the toxicity or the health of every company, right? Including what their negotiation strategies might been. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Every
I
day.
mean, probably more so. I mean, you're essentially being, if a company were to call in a consultancy to come in and do an evaluation of their business and their processes, that's essentially what you're doing, only with the thought process of would we be interested in acquiring this business? Is that right?
Yeah. Is it worth our money? That's exactly right. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. And so, yeah, I am. So look, if you're in business long enough, you get a lot of stuff right and you get some shit wrong. And
Yep.
I got some wrong. And one of the hardest lessons I learned, we talked about this, but let me share a little bit of the lesson, is that
Yeah.
we did an acquisition when I was a brand new president of a division, and we were in growth mode, and things were going great. And there was a lot we didn't know about this market we were exploding into. It was aerospace and defense, and so nobody in our company had a secret clearance. Nobody in our company was badged into special programs, and so we decided that one of the things that we need to do is we need to go there. So I'll avoid all the details, but we did this acquisition of a company very different than us. We were a Midwest-based aerospace company. They were a East Coast-based technology company, and together we were going to put their technology on our air asset. And boy, that's pretty simple. Marriage made in heaven. Well, the problem is culturally, we couldn't have been any different. And me as a leader, I looked at all the numbers that checked all the boxes, that opened up all the markets, that brought together every synergy you can imagine. And it was a no-brainer. I didn't bother to look at culture. It would take care of itself. And we got into that transaction. We got into the integration and then into the go forward strategy. We owned them and they all worked for me, and I was the leader. And I underestimated the amount of my effort it was going to take to try to manage essentially two businesses. If the culture doesn't fit, you can have all the processes you want, but if the people don't fit, the process doesn't work. And so it took so much of my time trying to figure that out. And at the end of the day, it all fell apart. I mean, almost to zero. Talk about hard lessons. I would say it cost my company millions because culture, not because of bad technology, not because of bad strategy. It was because we cared too little about how hard and how important it was that had a culture that fit. And to do that all over, we wouldn't do that deal again. We wouldn't do that based on culture. That's it. The technology is still spectacular, but culturally, it was a bad move and a bad acquisition for that reason. And I wore it. I pushed it. I funded it. Not me. I mean, I'm the president of the division. I funded it, and it didn't work. It was a failure, and it cost me professionally a lot. And I vowed to myself when I moved into M&A full time, I'm not going to overlook culture as one of the things that we have to pay attention to as we go forward, because we can't ever have this happen again.
Well, I want to, well, Matt Getty, go ahead. You look like you have something you wanted to say about that.
No, absolutely spot on.
Yeah. Lon, listening to that, I want to, we'll kind of wrap it up here with one final question, which is, you've gone from these high level corporate roles, and as we talked about political roles, you're probably still recovering from that, but you've gone from these roles down to what you're doing now at Normal 40 and working with everyday dudes, right? And so these dudes aren't out there all the time working through these $1 billion deals or whatnot. So what's it like for you making that transition from these high pressure roles into a guy who, when he leaves his podcast, he's headed to a farm? Tell me about that.
Yeah, man, I call it the Normal 40. Long story short, when we went through this transition I talked about, they had an offer to stay and I decided to go because I had another song, another dance in me is probably better said. And I didn't know what it was. I still don't have a resume. If somebody asked me for a resume, I don't have one. I just knew I wanted
Or
to bet on
business
myself.
card.
Or a business card. I don't have one of those either. So what the
Yeah.
hell am I doing? But I just knew I wanted to take a bet on myself. So I resigned, I separated, and I came to LinkedIn, and I had kind of a little bit of a following on LinkedIn, and I wrote about it. Hey, here's who I am. Here's what I've done. Here's been my successes. Here's what I've learned. I had an option to stay. It was an option to make more money than I ever thought I would ever have a chance to say yes to in my life, let alone say no. But for some reason, I couldn't be excited about it. My future wasn't there. I have to go figure it out. I'm out. And here I am writing on LinkedIn. Here's my story. Thanks for being here. I mean, essentially that was my note. And what happened was dudes from all over the world, dudes between the age of 38 and 55 flooded my inbox, all asking the same questions. How'd you know it was your time? How'd you know you had enough? How'd you know you had enough to retire? What'd your wife say? What'd your boss say? What do your kids think? What are you going to do? Will you take another job? Are you going to start your own business? Can you help me through it? I mean, everybody had these same questions. I'm like, holy shit. You mean the C-suite in North America and around the world is this miserable? I thought I was the only one who was sick of, doing everything for image. So I decided really quickly, I'm like, well, I'm going to keep talking to these guys and we'll see if they keep showing up. And every day I would show up, and every day for the last 15 months, I've showed up to LinkedIn and I've put a steady diet of a very consistent message out there of, if you're not happy, dude, it's on you to fix it. If you're 46 and you're making a lot of money and everything from the outside looks great, but in the inside, you're miserable, nobody fixes that for you. That's on you. That's my steady diet. And it's true. So people show up, they want to talk, and we do rambles. I got a podcast. I call it Normal 40 because it's normal and dudes don't talk about it. And it happens somewhere in midlife, somewhere in your 40s typically. And around the time you've got about 40 years left. So that's what I rotated into. And it's become a business where people hire me to help them get clarity on what they want, put a plan together for how they achieve it. And maybe they need funding. Maybe they need some of the things around them. I've got all the resources for that. Here you go. Let's go build your own second half story. And that's really what I'm doing now.
I mean, and we'll close it up with this, Matt Getty, you also, as a person who has now founded and started a few businesses and, had Lon buy a few of them on the side. But how does that resonate with you? Lon's passion, his kind of sense of like, what's next? What do you feel about that?
I love it, man. Life is so short. I mean, in our space, we work with a lot of executives and so many of them are so miserable. And I just look at them like, you've had so much success. You've had so much career success, but you just hate your life. Like, that is not what life's about. Life is about, aspiring for what's next. Alon, I mean, hats off, man. That's unbelievable. Really, really cool that you're helping so many people.
Yeah, man. It's an unbelievable trap. Making a lot of money, having a big image, having the big house, driving the nice car, going to the country clubs, taking the nice trips, all that stuff really paints you into a corner and takes away a lot of your options. And to unwind that, man, talk about image. We talked about what is image. Image is the representation, the external representation of who you need other people to believe you are. And that is the image we wanted. It's the image we chase. It's the image that we manicured and manufactured. We wanted it. And now we don't know how the hell to get out of it. And it's real, man. It is real. And I talk to dudes every single day, man. I've talked to, and they're amazing. I've talked to my clients, ER doctors, general surgeons, business owners. I mean, multi-million-dollar companies, hundreds of million-dollar companies, a farmer, a trucking company owner, a law firm owner. I mean, these are an accounting partner. I mean, these are, like I said, these are life dedicated jobs. And they get to this point in your life. It's like, well, I've dedicated my whole life to doing this, being exactly who I am. How do I can't undo that. And those are the dudes who find me. Anyway, so that's Normal 40. That's what I help people do. I've got a book that's coming out on July 19th. I don't know when this is going to air, but July 19th, called The Trade. And it's about how you deal with that, man. It's normal. You're not alone. There is a way. It's not free. It's a trade, but there's a way to do it.
I love it.
And Lon, did you say the name of your book is The Trade?
The Trade.
Okay, the trade and the website is normal40.com, right?
You got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Matt Getty, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, Lon, we really appreciate you having on. I mean, just your eminent expertise, and then also just the ability to transition into, just helping people be their authentic selves is unbelievable. So yeah, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, and from an authentic standpoint as well, I just want to say, sitting here having the chance to chat with Lon, the business acumen is obviously through the roof, but just from a personal standpoint, I mean, it's such an inspiring person to listen to. So Lon, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate having you on.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm glad to do this again, too, by the way. So if you got another topic you want to ramble on or just do a 2.0, I'm all game, man.
Okay, I really appreciate that.